7 weeks in, it's pretty clear that we have to believe that this defense is what it's shown us that it is. It's a unit that needs at least 30 points per game from the Commanders offense to be competitive. That and more right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders. I'm David Harrison, your guy on the ground, covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9, right here with you 5 days a week. And you can also find me writing about the Commanders on Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. You can follow me on X at DHarrison82. And I do want to thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or your first view. And an extra special thank you goes out to everybody for coming through for this episode, but especially the everydayers who continue to come through for every single episode. I know in trying times, it's a little bit harder to do so greatly appreciate you. Coming up on today's episode, we're going to identify 3 guys who may be in line for a benching. And we're, of course, going to talk about everything that went down and what it means, more importantly, from the Washington Commanders, 44-22 shellacking at the hands of the Dallas Cowboys. All of that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Still a very proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and still brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. The story of the Washington Commanders' 4th loss of the season was truly written in the first half. The defense systematically dismantled by the Dallas Cowboys offense, and a collapse of defense that was made only worse, adding insult to injuries, in-game benchings of safety Quan Martin and cornerback Marshawn Lattimore. So the top story from Week 7 and the 44-22 loss at the hands of the Dallas Cowboys, again, is that utter collapse of the Washington Commanders defense. And that's not to say that the Commanders defense is the only unit to blame for this. I think the special teams did pretty well for itself in all the phases, certainly setting up the first score of the game for the Commanders, which was a safety set up by a great punt by Tress Way, pursuit and downing the punt by safety Percy Butler. But outside the special teams unit, the offense certainly had its problems and has to carry its share of blame. But the defense ultimately, listen, I understand that this Dallas Cowboys offense was, one of the most electric in the NFL, scoring 29 points per game on average. But you give up 44 points against any offense, I don't care how electric they are, you've got problems. And clearly the Washington Commanders have defense problems. We already knew that. That wasn't really different, but this was just a whole different level of it. And when you look at this Dallas Cowboys team with Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Kevontae Turpin, and George Pickens, it's hard not to look ahead to Monday night next week. Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy. It's kind of hard, sitting here right after the game to not look ahead, a week plus and say you're just going to get more of the same. So that's why things have got to change drastically in the next 8 days, because really this whole thing, that we witnessed on Sunday afternoon into the evening was set right from the opening drive. Dallas Cowboys win the coin toss. They say we're going to receive the ball. They want to start the game on offense. And, look, you can take that as a shot. You can take it as whatever you want. But at the end of the day, what I think it is the Dallas Cowboys putting their best unit on the field first to start the game. That, of course, is their offense. I think the Washington Commanders can probably take a little bit of a read off of that. We'll talk about that as we get deeper into the week as well. But starting off in this game, the defense, again, the tone was set early on. 66-yard touchdown drive given up to the Dallas Cowboys. Didn't even take them 2 minutes to find the end zone. 37-yard pass interference penalty called on Marshawn Lattimore. Some people think it was a little bit ticky-tack. Look, at the end of the day, Marshawn's not getting his head around to play the ball. That gives the official all the evidence they possibly need to make a call. I know that there were some calls later on that Commanders fans and certainly some people in the media believe that the referee should have thrown in favor of the Commanders, like DPIs on the Dallas Cowboys. Look, just immediately after the game, I'll just tell you, I feel like it was a fairly, well officiated game as far as consistency is concerned. However, I'm sure there are flaws. I'm sure there are mistakes, things like that. At the time of this recording, I have not watched the broadcast copy. I have not rewatched the game. That's the purpose of this episode, is kind of my immediate real world reactions following the game in person. And I'll tell you, and I'm sure this isn't going to surprise you, I don't spend the game watching the refs. And unless I got my eyes on where a penalty occurred or where a penalty should have occurred, then it's not going to be something that I see in replay or I see like that, that kind of thing. Every once in a while, the stadium will show replays of penalties, and then I can form an opinion, but certainly not enough of them to form an opinion about the overall performance of the officials. So those of you who are kind of wondering what my thoughts are on the officiating from this game, I don't have a complete picture of that, so can't really give that to you. Just putting that out there. But explosive plays on the defense, got a complete picture of that, right? So you have the 37-yard penalty on Marshawn Lattimore, which of course is just as good as an explosive pass down the field because it's a huge amount of yards. And then later on, you have a one-play, 74-yard drive. Deep pass to CeeDee Lamb. Looks to me like they were in cover 3. And I say looks to me because I'm just reading what I see on the field. I don't know the call. I'm not in the huddle. I'm not in the headset. But it looks to me, like the team is in cover 3. Safety Darnell Savage is supposed to have the middle third of the field. Starts to drop off in the middle of the field with CeeDee Lamb and then comes off for an underneath route, leaving the middle of the field wide open, leaving CeeDee Lamb running downfield wide open. It just Marshawn Lattimore is trying to pursue the ball over the top. He ends up he's trying to field the ball like a center fielder, which, listen, I've never played cornerback in the National Football League, but it certainly looks like a play where Marshawn Lattimore, as he's running over to the ball, he's got to be aware that CeeDee Lamb is there. And he's got to be aware of where the ball is going in relation to him, in relation to CeeDee Lamb. And what he ends up doing is instead of intercepting the pass, he runs into Quan Martin, who's in pursuit of CeeDee Lamb, and completely takes him out of the play, which is basically the last guy who has a shot of reasonably coming down and tackling CeeDee Lamb. So anyway, 74 yards later, touchdown pass, just complete bust by the defense, and that brings the Cowboys obviously get a lot more momentum out of that. A late first half Commanders touchdown score. Jayden Daniels ends up running the ball into the end zone after kind of bobbling a snap, makes it 20-15. And to be honest with you, I'm sitting there. There's 40 seconds left in the first half, and I'm like, man, this team is down 5, and they get the ball to start the second half. Like, it's a miracle. Yet again, we've seen this story play out over and over again, and it's just amazing to me. And then the defense immediately gives up a 4-play, 72-yard touchdown drive in just 35 seconds. And it's not even just a 72-yard touchdown drive, guys, because the first play of that drive is a 7-yard sack. So really, 4-play, 72-yard touchdown drive is 3 plays, 79 yards surrendered. Just a complete and utter meltdown of defense by the Washington Commanders as a whole. Marshawn Lattimore victimized on one of those passes, specifically, I think 44 yards to get the ball down into their territory. And then Javonte Williams, a 33-yard carry, and then a 2-yard touchdown pass to just cap it all off. And then you've got injuries on top of it. Dorance Armstrong Jr. ruled out of the game with a knee injury, came in with a hamstring injury. They was trying to play through, and he ends up with a knee injury. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say he shouldn't have been playing in the first place. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not in the discussions and all that kind of stuff. But Dorance comes up with a knee injury, and that's your top sack leader. And if we're being real honest, like ever since Dietrich Wise got injured in the second week of the season, the edge setting, especially on the side he was playing, the defense's right side, has been very suspect at best. The pass rushing from that side has pretty much been non-existent. Dorance Armstrong Jr. really has been the only consistent pass rushing presence outside of maybe Bobby Wagner on a linebacker blitz here and there. So when he went out of the game, from that point on, the Commanders' defense, I know they came up with some hits and some sacks and all that stuff, but from a consistency standpoint, Commanders' defense just could not drum up a pass rush to save their life. All the while, they're getting gashed on the back end by passes. And we talked about this before, the conflict it creates for Joey Jr. is if you're not getting a pass rush, the traditional answer is bring more pressure, bring more guys. The problem is if you're gashing in the secondary and in pass coverage, the traditional answer is don't give up any more guys than you've already given up because you're going to thin out the group that's already getting gashed. So you're kind of battling between two types of common sense factors, and essentially you end up almost doing nothing. Not saying that Joey Jr. did nothing, but it just kind of makes it difficult to make a decision. So while the defense was a disaster, the offense, of course, had its own share of struggles, and the crucial middle 8 minutes showed just how out of sync this Washington Commanders team was in Week 7. We'll cover all of that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you by Rippling. If you're a business owner, here's the truth. SaaS promised to make work easier, but now the average company is buried by hundreds of apps that slow down your teams and simply don't work together. That's not SaaS. That's sad. Software as a disservice. And that is why you need Rippling. Rippling is the unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance all in one place. They've helped millions of businesses replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. They give you everything from onboarding to payroll to IT access. And the best part is it runs automatically and perfectly in sync. And right now, you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/lockedonnfl. Learn more at Rippling. That's RIPPLING.com/lockedonnfl. One more time. That's rippling.com/lockedonnfl for your first 6 months free. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by Prize Picks. And every day, you and I, we make decisions. But on Prize Picks, being right can actually get you paid for making the right decisions. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with Prize Picks, where it is good to be right. Playing Prize Picks is so much fun. It's simple, and it's a great way to add even more excitement to the game of football. You just pick more or less on player projections, like maybe Josh Allen's passing yards, or maybe Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown, and you're in the game. And with the new injury reboot feature, if your player leaves early and does not return to the game, it will not count against you. It's a lot of fun. So even if you're watching your Commanders play and you want to go with the Jayden Daniels stat line, even if the Commanders lose, you can potentially win and maybe salvage just a little bit of pleasure out of watching the game. Anyway, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. So this game, week 7, Washington Commanders lost to the Dallas Cowboys, defined by a series of just major back-breaking plays in favor of the Cowboys. And there was a handful of bright spots for the Commanders that were ultimately just wasted in mistakes, blown coverages, penalties, injuries, just all kinds of negativity coming out of this game. I got a lot of texts from a lot of insiders who are not very happy. Some are just overall sad about the season. Some are overall done with certain players. Some are overall done with certain coaches. There's just a myriad of targets for the misery. And that's kind of what tends to happen. And, look, I'll tell some of you that your misery is misplaced and you're not going to like that. I mean, I'm probably not going to tell you that specifically anyway, but ultimately the misery is justified. And when you have misery, when you have anger, angst, whatever you want to call it, it's human nature. We look for a place to release that. We need an outlet. We need someone to kind of carry that misery. So what went down in this game from start to finish is not comfortable, right? Like even when the Commanders had a lead, you just never really felt like, okay, like this team's got a grip on this game, right? Like it just never really got there. And then certainly as the game went on, even when the lead was, one score or maybe like they're within 2 scores and they're driving, there was just this overall feeling of something's going to happen to mess this thing up. So the middle 8 minutes of the game, again, we've talked about this absolutely critical portion of the game in every NFL game. Comes from 4 minutes left in the second quarter to 11 minutes left in the third quarter. The period between that, obviously halftime is in there. You have opportunities to, score and get the ball back if you're receiving the ball in the second half, all kinds of stuff. So who won that middle 8 period of this game? Well, the Dallas Cowboys did. Just like they won the entire rest of the game, they won the middle 8 minutes of the game and they won it decisively. It was an absolute disaster for the Washington Commanders, which is a little bit ironic because the last 4 minutes of the game and the last 2 minutes of the game and half and all that stuff are areas that we know. It's not new. It happened last year. It happened even more this year. The Commanders work on that part of the game very specifically, very, very often on offense, on defense. So to see it go so poorly, even in a season like this, like to this week, it went more poorly than any other week of the season. Jayden Daniels, the lone positive scores, right, makes the game 20-15 in that window. But then again, we already covered it, but the immediate 72-yard touchdown drive and answer by the Dallas Cowboys in just 35 seconds, extends the lead back out to 27-15 heading into the half. And then coming out of halftime, the Commanders get the ball, start the third quarter. They're moving it. And on 1st and 10 from the Dallas Cowboys 39-yard line, Jayden Daniels strip sacked and injured all in the same play. Injures his right hamstring, leaves the game, goes into the medical tent, immediately jogs into the locker room, which I will say is a good thing, but it's not a good thing in the sense of me telling you like he's going to play in Kansas City. I'm not telling you he's not going to play in Kansas City. Dan Quinn told us after the game that Jayden will get an MRI on Tuesday or on Monday, and hopefully he'll have more. I'm going to go ahead and anticipate that he's not going to have anything definitive, and we'll just basically have to see how it goes Wednesday, Thursday, Friday or Saturday into the weekend, and then into Monday night. So, expect this to be a little bit of a long, drawn-out process as far as whether or not Jayden's going to play and how healthy he is and all that stuff. We've been through it already with the knee. Now we're going to go through it with the hamstring, and that was just kind of a bottoming out moment, man. It's 27-15. Your quarterback just went down with an injury, fumbled the ball, gave the ball away. Now the Dallas Cowboys have the ball, and they end up driving back 9 plays, 55 yards, and they get a touchdown to double up the Commanders, make it 34-15. And, it wasn't like a checkout moment, right? First of all, I've got a job to do. I'm a professional. I pride myself in my professionalism. Some of you may have turned off the game at that point, and you're a fan. I don't blame you for that, and nobody's going to criticize you for that. But me, I do my job, so we watch the whole thing. Anyway, but look, that stretch of the game, that middle 8 minutes, completely broke this game open for the Dallas Cowboys. Washington Commanders up until then and kind of shown some fight back a little bit here and there. But ultimately, the defense collapsed. The offense lost a starting quarterback, and Dallas turned a one-score game into just a full-on blowout. Our takeaways from the game, our quick rundown takeaways, we got a good, bad, and an ugly. Our good takeaway, Daron Payne. Daron Payne continues to have a very strong season. He had the safety, multiple pass deflections in this game, and the run game was not able to penetrate the middle of that field. In fact, I'll say that's the only thing really we've seen consistently from this team all season outside of special teams is that no opponent is running between the guards against the Washington Commanders with consistent success. So Daron Payne, Javon Kinlaw certainly proving to be worth keeping and proving to be worth every penny that Josh Harris is paying them right now. Our bad takeaway, shorthanded offense couldn't keep up. We talked about the track meet. We talked about the shootout, all that stuff. The Washington Commanders come in. Chris Moore is, veteran who bounces around practice squads. He's the number 4 receiver on this roster, having to be the number 1. Luke McCaffrey is the number 5, having to be the number 2. Jalen Lane is the code number 5, having to be the code number 2. And then, oh, by the way, you've got Robbie Chosen, who was signed to the practice squad not even a month ago, getting his first game action. It was just it's really no shade at any of those guys, right? But it is just a sad existence of what the Washington Commanders offense is. I was really excited for a guy like Luke McCaffrey maybe get the opportunity to kind of showcase just how much he's grown. Jalen Lane is a rookie, so it's hard to put a whole lot of expectations on him. But you're still, excited for. Let's see how Cliff uses him. What kind of creativity do we see? And we just didn't see it. You know what I mean? It just the breakouts didn't come. The one-on-ones didn't come. I mean, the Dallas Cowboys are stacking the box, which leaves you with one-on-one matchups in the secondary, and not a single receiver popped off the field in this game. I got to go back and watch the tape. Maybe there's routes one that I missed or something like that, but it just very disappointed that not even one of them was able to pop off the field and kind of take advantage of the opportunity. And I'm sure they are too. Obviously, they want to do it more than not. The ugly takeaway, the secondary, man. The secondary is a complete disaster. Responsible for a 37-yard defensive pass interference penalty, 74-yard touchdown due to a busted coverage. And ultimately, the secondary is just so atrocious, has been all season long, that it ended up with the benchings of multiple starters. Some key plays, that 74-yard touchdown from Dak Prescott to CeeDee Lamb, obviously the safety by Daron Payne, and then the Marcus Mariota interception. Deron Bland intercepting a duck thrown by Marcus Mariota. And no, I'm not trying to be cute because Marcus Mariota went to Oregon. Return for a touchdown, and that interception ultimately, not only there was a lot of hope that the team was going to kind of get everything corrected in the second half, but that play, that moment right there really just kind of sealed the whole thing. With the defense in shambles, it's fair to ask which players might be on the hot seat heading into next weekend. We're going to cover that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do simply more than move or do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every single ride, has more IIHS Top Safety Plus pick awards than anyone else as of August of 2025. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how we craft every model. And like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant, just like Mazda's details in every one of their vehicles, from the interiors to the exteriors to the way that these vehicles handle. You can kind of just tell that the same craftsmanship and intentional effort that athletes put into their bodies and their work and their crafts, and the coaches put into their game plans and their schemes and all that stuff. Even though, as a Commanders fan, you know this, it doesn't always work out with Mazda. However, when you get behind the wheel, you can feel all of that kind of syncing up the way that you want it to on a football field. So go to Mazda, check out their line of vehicles, and move and be moved. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is also brought to you by FanDuel. NFL is headed into late October, and things are heating up. Teams are starting to separate themselves a little bit. But right now, I think that everybody's just kind of all in a pack, and there's still a whole lot of football to be played and a whole lot of things to be determined. And FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss while you watch all of it go down. Right now, new customers, you join FanDuel, bet just $5. And if that $5 bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets. That's right. You pick a bet, you put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. No better time than our pregame episode, our last pregame show of every single week. I drop 5 bets for you, and one of them is low risk. One's lowest risk, low risk, regular risk, high risk, highest risk. So if you go on that lowest risk, so far this season, we've hit every lowest risk bet that we have placed. You put $5 on that if you want to. I can't guarantee it's going to work, but if you win, you get $300 to use across the app. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. So it's easy to say bench him. And we've had those conversations here on the show. I've had mailbag episodes where insiders send me mailbags asking me, is it time to bench this guy? Is it time to bench that guy? And with the roster banged up, there's limited opportunities. And then you always have the same question. I'm always going to tell you the same thing. The question isn't just, is it time to bench a guy? The question is, if you're benching him, who are you bringing in to replace him? Because that guy's got to be better, or you at least have to feasibly believe that guy's performance could be better. However, there's some comments from Dan Quinn after the game that make it pretty realistic that at least a couple of players are on the verge of getting benched if they haven't already just straight up been benched. It's going to stay that way. So we've already seen Brandon Coleman benched from the offensive line. Chris Paul put in his place. That has gone pretty well overall. And then on Sunday, as the game flow went on, we noticed sitting up there in the press box, Quan Martin was out after a certain point. Didn't come back. No injury designation was reported. And then move forward a little bit. Marshawn Lattimore was out for a little bit. Didn't come back. No injury designation reported. There's even a stretch where Mikey Sainristil was out of the game. Now, he eventually came back in the game. So, again, I'm not sure what was going on there. Dan Quinn did say after the game that there were some players moved around, some players pulled out. And he did specify that at least some players, he didn't mention specifically who or even what side of the ball, but he said some of them were not pulled out due to injury. And so it just brings up the question of who might be getting benched as the Washington Commanders try to fix this thing. Because I've always said this in the world of leadership, the worst thing you can do is nothing. That's the worst. The worst decision is no decision. Looking at a situation saying, man, it's really bad, and then just doing the same thing over and over again. Again, it's the definition of insanity and all that stuff, right? But it's literally the leadership equivalent of doing nothing, is to continue doing the exact same thing you've been doing with no or limited success. And I'm not saying that Joe Witt Jr. and his staff have been doing the same thing for the last 7 weeks, trying to figure this thing out. But eventually it comes to a point where you've tried tweaking the scheme, you've tried tweaking the teaching, you tried tweaking the communication. Now you got to start tweaking the people. And I think this is the time to do it. Quan Martin came out. Look, he had a really good play against the Los Angeles Chargers. But certainly there have been some moments where you see him blowing coverage or him being out of position, things like that. So I think Quan Martin could be a potential target for one of those moves. Darnell Savage is obviously a guy that has been in the league for a while. Look, honestly, I could see them trying to use Darnell Savage with Quan Martin and using Darnell Savage with Jeremy Reed. So honestly, they could go any direction in their either way. Jeremy Reeves, we all love Revo, highly talented special teams player, doesn't have a lot of experience playing defense. So if Joe Witt Jr. were to see his lack of experience as a little bit of a reason why some of these things are happening, not necessarily that he's blowing a lot of plays, but just specifically maybe not making some plays that he should be making, wouldn't necessarily be surprised there. Second player in the hot seat, Marshawn Lattimore. I know a lot of you guys have already been on this tip. I'm always going to be a person who's like, look, trust the process, go through it, and all this stuff. I've defended Marshawn a lot on this program every day, as you already know that. It's really hard to defend him after this performance in the Dallas Cowboys. The 37-yard DPI not getting his head around. The 33-yard pass completion at the end of the half completed over him, not getting his head turned around. At this point in time, look, Marshawn has really never been a technically, expert, whatever, cornerback. He's always just been this athletic freak. And right now, it just kind of looks like his athleticism is not where it needs to be and not where it used to be. And that happens when you get older, when you get injured, things like that. And it just may be time to give somebody else another opportunity. Jonathan Jones came in at one point and finished the game for the Commanders. That 74-yard touchdown, honestly, it just kind of blows my mind to see him out there trying to field an interception, not understanding where CeeDee Lamb is in relation to the field, running into Quan Martin, taking him out of the play. Like it was just kind of a comedy of errors, man, to be honest with you. Ultimately leads to a huge score. And then the third player that I think could be removed from starting rotation, not because he's done anything wrong, but it's Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt. And again, Bill hasn't done anything wrong. I just think that this team, and we've seen it too. This is what kills me. We've seen this 2 weeks work. Start the game with Chris Rodriguez. Run between the tackles, run between the guards, physical running game. Tire out that defense, punish them a little bit. You bring in Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, you hit the edges. Ja'Cory can run between the tackles, sure, but he's much better on the edges. He's much better in stretch zone, all that kind of stuff. Let him read, find a lane, cut, get through the lane, get upfield. Jeremy McNichols comes in, kind of stabilizes things a little bit, bounce back and forth between him and Bill. And then if you have a lead later, or if you're in short yardage, or you need to just reestablish control of the game, maybe work the clock a little bit, bring Chris back in, keep the guys fresh. Total of like 20 to 24 carries between the three backs. Certainly reasonable, easy to do. I got several texts, man, asking me why Chris Rodriguez Jr. wasn't playing. I got asked by several media members if I knew of any. Like, I know he had the calf injury. It was clear before the weekend. Like, there were other media members in the press box being like, hey, like, do you know of anything of him maybe being more injured than they let on? Things like that. Because none of us can understand why you come in here against one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL and you don't establish the run. It's very confusing. We're going to dive more into that this week. Trust me. So like I said, the offense is not off the hook here, but the defense is just so much worse. So that's going to do it for this episode. Our immediate reactions following the Washington Commanders 44-22 loss, butt whooping at the hand of the Dallas Cowboys. They dropped to 3-4 on the season. The good news is 10 games left. A lot of things can change. A lot of things can happen. Next time on Locked On Commanders, we're going to continue to talk about the fallout from this. We've heard from Dan Quinn. We'll hear from him again. So we'll get to some of the lessons learned. In the meantime, if you've got questions or comments, text them to me directly by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. For your second listen, get a double dose of Locked On NFL. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. To the Everydayers, I see you every day. I thank you every day, and I appreciate you coming through for another episode today. And to everybody, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another. And I'll see you again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.